London Zoo was set in Regent's Park, one of the grandest outdoor spaces in the city. The park was closed at night, so Eric had to climb over the railings. Once inside, he circled the outer fence of the zoo for a while, searching for a way in. Ahead, he spotted a tall tree in the park, the branches of which drooped over into the zoo. Thinking again about how Gertrude would climb it, he scaled the tree trunk using his hands and feet, just like the gorilla did. From the tree trunk, the boy shimmied across one of the branches on his bottom, but as he scrambled further away from the trunk, the branch thinned and the inevitable happened. Crack! The branch snapped. Eric found himself tumbling through the air. He was under water. Not just that, he could sense dozens of creatures swishing around him. Had he fallen into a pool of piranhas? Was he going to be gobbled alive? Eric desperately swam to the surface and took a gasp of air. No, these were much bigger than piranhas and far friendlier too. They were penguins. The boy had plunged into the penguin pool. It had just been built and was more like a water park with slides and a fountain. Perfect if you were a penguin, not so good if you were a boy. The slippery birds played around Eric, pecking at him. One even perched on his head. "Get off," he said affectionately, as he guided the penguin back into the water. Eric swam to the edge of the pool and began clambering up the side. But it was slippery, and he plunged back into the pool again. This time he swam over to the edge, and then he heard a familiar sound. Clink, clank, clunk. It was Sid. "What are you doing in there?" the old man called down. "Taking a swim?" called Eric, trying to make light of the situation. Sid huffed and shook his head. "Wait there." There was silence for a moment, before the old man returned with a long-handled net. It was the one he used for fishing out penguin poop. "Hold on to this." Eric did as he was told, and Sid hauled him out of the water. "You're soaking wet," said the old man. "That normally happens when you go for a swim," replied Eric. "What are you doing here at the zoo so late? It's way after closing time." "I was worried about Gertrude. She looked so frightened today." "She was, but you should be tucked up in bed by now, young man." "So should you," said Eric. This stopped the old man in his tracks. "I know, but I was so sure there was going to be another bombing raid. We've had them night after night for weeks. I wanted me to be here for all the animals." "Me too!" exclaimed the boy. Sid looked up at the sky. "It's quiet up there in the clouds right now. You should go home." As if on cue, the air raid siren wailed. "I spoke too soon," hissed the old man. "Come with me." Sid grabbed Eric by the hand and led him through the zoo. Clink, clank, clunk. The zoo might have been in darkness because of the nightly blackout, but it was noisier than ever. The air raid warning had woken all the animals up. "Are we the only ones here?" asked Eric, as he held his great-uncle's hand tightly. "No, there'll be the night watchman, Batter, or Corporal Batter, as he demands to be known. We'll have to keep an eye out for him. He's the only one who's meant to be in the zoo after dark." Eric could hear a distant humming sound, next a rumbling. Finally, there was a loud drone as the Nazi planes came right over their heads, flying in neat formation as they powered through the night sky. The first bomb whistled through the air, and the next, and the next. Then the explosion started. Lightning was striking all over London. Searchlights scoured the sky before big guns fired at the planes from the ground. Fire engine bells rang. Eric could just make out the sound of people screaming and shouting. The boy's heart raced. The noise, the lights, the debris. Another bomb exploded, even nearer than the last, and another, and another. The elephants raised their trunks and hooted. The camels reared up on their back legs and moaned. The lions leapt from rock to rock and roared. However, the saddest sound of all came from the gorilla's cage. Gertrude's huge hands were covering her big ears as she tried to block out the boom of the bombs. At every explosion she let out a shriek and rocked from side to side. Eric broke away from the old man and hurled himself at the cage. "Gertrude!" cried the boy, but the gorilla wouldn't even open her eyes. "Gertrude!" "Raisins!" shouted Eric. "You what?" splustered Sid. It was clear that of all the things he was expecting the boy to shout at this point, raisins was a long way down the list. "Raisins, they're her favourites. After bananas, of course, but you can't get bananas these days. A handful of raisins might just calm her nerves." "You're right," agreed Sid. "Clever boy. We'll make a zookeeper of you yet." The boy beamed. "Maybe one day. But where am I going to get raisins from at this time of night? The snack bar might have some, but I don't have any money." "You won't need any money. It's closed." "Well, if it's closed, how am I going to get in?" "You'll have to break in." Eric gulped. He'd never broken in anywhere, ever, and he was rather hoping to get through his whole life without doing so. "Climb through the windows," shouted Sid over the noise. "Grab some raisins and run." The bombs were landing nearer and nearer to the zoo all the time. Eric had been to the zoo so many times that even in the dark he knew his way around. In no time at all he'd found the snack bar, climbed up onto a dustbin, and forced the side window open. Next he slid down inside and fumbled in the darkness to find a jumbo bag of raisins. Tempted though he was to take some sweets for himself, he resisted. Then, using a chair as a stepladder, he climbed up and out through the window and leapt down onto the dustbin. Eric glanced at the bag of raisins. There was a tear in it. He must have caught it on the little hook on the window frame. The boy did his best to stop the windows falling out as he ran back to the gorilla's cage, bombs dropping all around. "I've got the raisins, Uncle Sid," he called out, breathless from the running. The gorilla was still rocking, covering her ears, letting out a sad cry. "Have you been eating them?" asked Sid, feeling that the bag was light. "No, the bag got ripped and I dropped some on the way." "A likely story." "It's true." The old man turned his attention to the gorilla. Now, Gertrude, come on, old girl. Your friend has a nice juicy raisin for you." Eric took one of the little treats out of the bag and pushed it through the metal bars. This was the nearest explosion yet. Louder than all the others, they could feel the force of the blast. This bomb must have landed in Regent's Park. Soil sprayed everywhere, pelting the gorilla. Poor Gertrude was scared out of her wits. She shrieked and shrieked and shrieked, and she leapt about her cage wildly. "No!" screamed the boy, terrified at what he saw. Instead of taking the raisin as he'd hoped, the gorilla had bashed her head so hard against the cage that the wire had buckled. "Make her stop!" pleaded Eric. Sid looked as worried as the boy. It was clear the old man had never seen the gorilla acting like this before. "It's just a bad storm, Gertrude," lied the zookeeper. This time Gertrude leapt to the middle of her cage and grabbed onto the rope tied to the metal bars at the top of her enclosure and yanked with all her might. "What's she doing?" cried Eric. "She's trying to get out," replied Sid. The gorilla wrenched the rope so hard that the roof of her cage tore off from 3 sides, and it toppled into her cage. It landed at an angle, providing a ramp for Gertrude to run up, her huge feet thudding on the metal. Eric and Sid looked on in a mixture of wonder and horror at the gorilla standing at the top of her cage. She was perfectly silhouetted by the full moon as she beat her chest and let out an alarming howl. Eric and Sid could feel the heat from the bomb. It must have landed inside the zoo itself. A tall tree in the picnic area exploded into flames. The heat was enough to sweep you off your feet. Eric thought he was going to be burned alive. The zoo lit up red and orange and yellow as black smoke darkened the sky. Gertrude leapt down from the top of the cage and landed on the ground with a terrific thud. Eric stood frozen in fear as the huge creature lolloped over to him. She stared him right in the face, and he saw a look of terrible sadness in her eyes. "Don't scream," hissed Sid, "and don't make any sudden movements." The boy nodded slowly. "If we keep still and quiet, then all should be fine." Gorillas were so strong they'd been known to tear a man's arm clean off. Eric knew that. But Gertrude was his friend. There had always been this special connection between the pair, even though the bars of the cage had kept them apart, until now. They were now standing nose to nose. He could even feel her warm breath on his face. Eric felt a strange mixture of joy and fear all at once, but the joy was stronger than the fear, and the boy smiled. Gertrude loved to copy Eric, so she smiled back, flashing her teeth and those long fangs on either side of her mouth. As Sid looked on and whispered, "Now be a good girl, Gertrude," The gorilla puckered up as if to give the boy a kiss. Eric had seen some films with lovey-dovey bits. He'd noticed how the grown-ups often closed their eyes when they kissed, so he did the same. Splurt! But it wasn't a kiss, it was a raspberry. A big, wet raspberry. For the second time that day, Eric had gorilla spittle all over his face, but he didn't mind one bit. He laughed and the gorilla joined in. You too, chuckled Sid. Now come on, Gertrude, let's get back inside what's left of your cage. With that, the man took the gorilla by the hand. Say good night, Eric, he said. Good night, Eric, repeated the boy. Wait, I am Eric. I meant to say good night to Gertrude, you great bozo. Good night, Gertrude. That's better, replied Sid, looking up at the sky. Once again the plains were nothing more than a distant hum. Come on, old girl. Let me help, exclaimed the boy as he took Gertrude by her other hand. Just then a gunshot rang out. A bullet whizzed over their heads. Gertrude screamed. The gorilla shook the pair from her hands and they tumbled to the ground. They cried as Gertrude raced off into the darkness of the night. The bombs might have stopped for the night, but the sounds of gunshots startled all the animals in the zoo all over again. What on earth do you think you're doing? Thundered Sid. Eric had never seen the old man so angry. He was shouting at a short, squat figure in the distance who was now hurrying towards the pair. Batter! Cried Sid. Corporal Batter to you. Corporal Batter was the night watchman for London Zoo. He had been made a corporal in the First World War and had kept using the title. The rank was just above Lance Corporal, just below Sergeant. An achievement, of course, but only a certain type of man would want to keep reminding people of it every single day, 100 times a day, for the rest of his life. A man like Batter. The corporal's job was to make sure the animals didn't escape from their cages during the night. Since the Blitz had begun, there was every chance that one of the bombs could land in the zoo and destroy the cages and enclosures. Then you might very well have an escaped hippopotamus waddling down Oxford Street looking for a bargain, or a fugitive tiger leaping on the back of a double-decker bus, or a runaway rhinoceros charging towards 10 Downing Street to knock down the door of the Prime Minister. When the Nazi bombing campaign began, London Zoo's resident vet, Miss Narl, had put down every single venomous snake or spider. There was a real chance these creatures could find their way into the homes of Londoners and kill them just like bombs. Imagine sitting on the toilet and a huge furry spider bites you on the bottom, or lying in bed at night and a snake slithers its way up your leg. So Batter had been given the order that if a dangerous animal, escaped from its cage during the night, he could shoot it on sight. A gorilla more than fitted into this category. Sid and Eric were sure that Gertrude wouldn't hurt a flea. Well, that wasn't strictly true. If Gertrude found a flea in her fur, she would eat it. But this gorilla was more interested in blowing raspberries than harming anyone. I huffed and puffed Corporal Batter as he finally reached the pair. The old soldier was out of breath. Well, out with it, man, demanded Sid. I think he's just trying to get his breath back, said Sid. I was aiming for the monkey. The gorilla isn't a monkey, it's an ape, protested the boy. Same difference, snapped Batter. No, it isn't, and you can't shoot Gertrude, she's my friend. I have orders, declared Batter. With that, the old soldier cocked his rifle. Put that gun away, you fool, exclaimed Sid, pushing its nose down. I'll use my rifle whenever I want. It is me who's the war hero, remember that, Sidney Pratt, not you. Sid hung his head in shame. The man was right. His tin legs told that story. Next, Batter turned his attention to the boy. And as for you, you're not even supposed to be here. A child at the zoo in the middle of the night. It is forbidden. My fault, Batter, said Sid. He's family. Corporal Batter. Just wait till Sir Frederick hears about this. Now stand aside. I have an escaped monkey to hunt. With this, he pushed the pair out of the way and marched off in the direction in which the ape had run. Eric looked at Sid, tears welling in his eyes. He's not really going to kill her, is he? He's going to try, said Sid. We need to stop him, cried Eric.